Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a topic that dominated headlines just a few years ago. The 2019 Hong Kong protests. It was a movement that captured the world's attention. A story of a city fighting for its identity and future. So, what exactly happened, and what does it all mean today? Let's break it down. To really understand the protests of 2019, we have to go back a bit, specifically to 1997. This was the year Hong Kong was handed over from British to Chinese rule. The agreement for this handover was based on a principle called one country, two systems. The idea was that Hong Kong would be part of China, but it would keep its own separate economic and political systems for 50 years, until 2047. This meant Hong Kong would enjoy freedoms not available on the mainland, like freedom of speech, a free press, and an independent judicial system. For many years, this system seemed to work, more or less. Hong Kong thrived as a global financial hub, a vibrant city where East met West. But beneath the surface, tensions were simmering. Many Hong Kongers felt that Beijing was slowly but surely eroding the high degree of autonomy they were promised. There were concerns about political reforms, the selection of the city's leader, and the interpretation of Hong Kong's mini-constitution. The Basic Law. The spark that lit the flame in 2019 was a proposed extradition bill. On the surface, the bill seemed straightforward. It would allow criminal suspects to be sent from Hong Kong to mainland China for trial. But for many in Hong Kong, this was a massive red flag. They feared it would shatter the legal firewall between Hong Kong as independent courts and the mainland as legal system, which is controlled by the Communist Party. Opponents worried it could be used to target political dissidents, activists, or anyone critical of Beijing, putting them at risk of unfair trials. What started as a specific opposition to this one bill quickly transformed into something much bigger. The first major protest in June 2019 saw an estimated 1 million people take to the streets. It was a stunning display of public sentiment. The government initially pushed back, but the protests only grew. Just a week later, an even larger march, estimated at nearly 2 million people, filled the city's streets. Think about that in a city of about 7.5 million. That's more than a quarter of the entire population. The sheer scale of the demonstrations was historic. The government, led by Chief Executive Carrie Lam, eventually suspended the bill and later fully withdrew it. But by then, it was too late. The movement had evolved. The protesters' demands had expanded beyond just the extradition bill. They crystallized into what became known as the 5 demands. First, the full withdrawal of the extradition bill, which was eventually met. Second, the government to retract its characterization of the protests as riots. Third, the release and dropping of charges against all arrested protesters. Fourth, an independent inquiry into police conduct and alleged brutality during the protests. And fifth, the implementation of genuine universal suffrage, meaning the right for all Hong Kongers to elect their leaders and representatives directly. This last demand, for universal suffrage, was the core issue. It went to the heart of the one country, two systems promise, and the desire for genuine democracy. The protests became a broad movement for democratic freedoms and against what was seen as increasing encroachment from Beijing. The methods of protest were incredibly diverse. There were peaceful mass marches, which were the hallmark of the movement, but there were also sit-ins at the airport, human chains that stretched 4 miles across the city, and creative forms of digital activism. People used online forums like LIHKG to coordinate, and the encrypted messaging app Telegram to communicate. The movement adopted the slogan "Be Water," a philosophy borrowed from martial arts legend Bruce Lee, meaning protesters should be fluid, adaptable, and formless, moving quickly and unpredictably. However, as the months wore on, the protests also saw escalating confrontations. Clashes between some protesters and the police became more frequent and intense. We saw images of tear gas, rubber bullets, and water cannons being used in dense urban areas. On the other side, some protesters used bricks, petrol bombs, and vandalized property associated with the government or mainland China. These scenes of violence were broadcast around the world, creating a narrative of a city in turmoil. It's important to remember that the vast majority of participants were peaceful, but these clashes became a defining feature in media coverage. The global reaction was significant. Many countries and international organizations expressed concern. The United States, in particular, took concrete action. In November 2019, the U.S. Congress passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, with near-unanimous bipartisan support. This law required the U.S. government to annually assess whether Hong Kong was maintaining enough autonomy from Beijing to justify its special trading status. It also allowed for sanctions to be imposed on officials in Hong Kong and mainland China who were deemed responsible for human rights abuses in the city. Following the passage of this act, the U.S. government did impose sanctions on several key officials, including the chief executive, Carrie Lam. These sanctions aim to put financial and political pressure on those seen as undermining Hong Kong's autonomy. The U.S. response was a clear signal to Beijing that its actions in Hong Kong would have international consequences. So, where did this all lead? The protests, which had raged for months, were eventually brought to a halt, partly by the exhaustion of the movement and the onset of the global pandemic in early 2020. But the final, decisive blow came in June 2020. This was when Beijing's top legislature bypassed Hong Kong's own legislative process and imposed a sweeping national security law on the city. This law was it criminalized acts of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. The language was broad and vaguely defined, giving authorities powerful new tools to suppress dissent. In the eyes of many, this law effectively ended the one country, two systems framework, as it was originally understood. The impact was immediate and profound. Dozens of pro-democracy activists, politicians, and journalists were arrested under the new law. Prominent opposition figures were jailed or went into exile. Pro-democracy media outlets, like the Apple Daily newspaper, were forced to shut down. Civil society groups and trade unions disbanded. The political landscape of Hong Kong was fundamentally rewritten. Elections were reformed to ensure only patriots, as defined by Beijing, could hold office. Looking back, the 2019 protests were a pivotal moment in Hong Kong's history. They represented a powerful, citywide cry for autonomy and democracy. For a time, the movement showed the world the incredible resilience and determination of the people of Hong Kong. It also highlighted the deep-seated tensions at the core of the one country, two systems model. The U.S. and other Western nations responded with legislation and sanctions, framing the issue as a global struggle for democratic values. But on the ground, the imposition of the national security law has silenced the protest movement and reshaped the city's political and social fabric. Today, the Hong Kong of 2024 is a very different place from the Hong Kong of 2018. The vibrant, often chaotic, and vocal political debates that once characterized the city have been largely muted. For the people who marched in the streets, for the millions who hoped for a different future, the outcome has been deeply disheartening. The story of the 2019 protests serves as a powerful and complex chapter in the ongoing narrative of freedom, autonomy, and the shifting dynamics of global power. It's a reminder of how quickly a city's destiny can change. Thanks for watching, everyone. This is a heavy topic, and there's so much more we could discuss. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into important global issues. See you in the next one.